Each year I take my camera and travel this beautiful province looking for things that interest me. Sometimes I find subjects to film where I least expect them. While looking for a place to fish for Atlantic salmon, I ran into a fellow from Maine, Brook. Now I would like to share with you the trip we made with Ed Pilgrim to the beautiful islands of Hare Bay. I'm Lloyd Colburn, and welcome to Newfoundland Outdoors. It's a beautiful summer's day here at Maine Brook. We are on the tip of the Great Northern Peninsula. This is a typical northern community, but there's something special going on here, and we have driven a long way just to take a look. I'm surprised and delighted to be met by Ian Gowdy. He's a naturalist and biologist with Canada Wildlife Services, but I really came here to see Ed and Bessie Pilgrim, for it was their efforts to hatch and release Eider ducks that really got me interested. But Ian tells me that Ed is behind the house, working on something for his duck project. He never stops. He's a bundle of energy. Ed built this house, a community ski lodge, and 2 fishing boats since he came back from the mainland a couple of years ago. And now we'll see what he's doing with sea ducks. Here in the garage, feeding trays are being prepared. We move on out into the backyard and take a look. Well, Ed and Bessie have been busy all right. There's evidence of long, hard work everywhere. The construction of all these holding boxes, they have to be painted, wired with infrared lamps, and ventilated. Well, Ed hasn't stopped much, that's for sure. As I size up the situation, I can see that an awful lot of work must have gone into this before now. Gathering the eggs on the islands, bringing them back, and then incubating them, babysitting the chicks until they got to this stage. Yes, it must have been a full-time job. And feeding all these ducks and cleaning the pens. It's a full day's work from daylight to dark, looking after some 90-odd ducks. And 96 ducks is not bad when you consider that Ed started with just 100 eggs. That's a pretty good success rate. They're cautious little rascals and show no signs of imprinting by humans. That's good. Ed has another job. Each day he has to go way out in the bay and collect fresh mussels to feed these birds. Small mussels in the harbor around the wharves may be contaminated. The birds can also be contaminated by dirty food trays. So Bessie has more than just one set of dishes to clean up each day. She not only washes dishes around the house, but she also has to wash dishes for 96 ducks. Well, we finally get to meet Ed. He informs Ian that he's just completed the last of the net support poles. He explains to me that when the ducklings are to be released on the islands, they'll be protected for a few days from the hawks and gulls by a fence of netting. This will give the young birds time to waterproof and get used to their new surroundings. Pat, Ian's assistant, checks the maturity of the young eider and introduces it to water for the first time. Well, there's no doubt about it. This little fellow wants to get out of here. His enthusiasm to get going persuades the 2 biologists that today may be as good as any to release these birds. They decide to take them to their real home, the grassy islands of Hare Bay. Well, Ed has been waiting for this for a long time. So he tells us to get a move on. So we head for the boat. The young ducks are loaded aboard in cardboard boxes. Ian is releasing just 9 birds today, and that's about 10% of the total number. He wants to be sure that things go okay before he releases the rest of them. We take our cameras and film bags and get aboard. Bryce and I are delighted to be part of this trip. We grew up on the salt water and spent much of our time poking around islands in Notre Dame Bay. This is a real treat for me. Everything is stored away safely, and we're on our way. town of Brook slips behind us as we head out into Hare Bay. The salt here has that beautiful, familiar smell of the land marsh. It's cool and invigorating. Ed and Pat are keeping alongside of us in the smaller boat, and I keep my camera ready. Well, man, it's beautiful out here. It reminds me a lot of Dildo Run down in Notre Dame Bay with all the islands, Bryce.
Yeah, well, you don't see ducks like that down Dildo, though. Now, look at that, boy.
Oh, sunny boy. Watch out, Ed, there's no water here at all. There's rocks everywhere.
Yeah, no, Ed don't know where he's going now.
Well, we've arrived. But I'm surprised that we've landed on this large wooded island and not on one of the smaller grassy islands out in the bay. But the boys have been here before. They've already erected the holding pen. We couldn't have picked a better day. Ian and Pat land on the point. But we unload our gear in this sheltered little cove, and the fresh ocean air is filled with the smell of wildflowers as it blows off the land. In this beautiful setting, work is a real pleasure. It's warm and peaceful in this cove. There's a touch of tranquility in the air. As Ed secures the boat, his daughter, Amanda, presents an iris to her mother. I can tell that this is going to be a wonderful evening.
When it's time for a bite to eat, our whole family loves the fresh, crisp taste of Purity cream crackers and milk lunch biscuits. They're so good, everyone loves them, with some jam or a bit of butter. Purity crackers are always fresh, always crisp, because they're made right here, just the way we like them.
Yamaha Enduro outboards are built tough and rugged and push like much bigger inshore fishing engines. 25, 30, and 40 horsepower models provide impressive prop-rated performance with heavier gears, dual oil seals, easy change prop options, standard lighting coils. Depend on your Newfoundland Yamaha outboard dealer for factory-trained technicians. A full line of Yamaha outboards, expert service, and complete parts inventory. So buy Yamaha saltwater tough Enduro outboards. Count on them season after season.
These holding boxes were brought all the way out here for a very good reason. They're placed at the edge of the shoreline so that parts of the wire mesh bottom is flooded by the salt water. This is a critical part of this experiment because the young ducks must first waterproof their feathers. They do this from an oil gland located under their tail. But is this taught by the mother, or do these young ducks do it instinctively? Well, we'll soon find out. Pat checks the birds, and she's pleasantly surprised. A couple of the little fellows have already started to waterproof. There's a feeling of relief along the beach, especially for Bessie. She's dreaded this moment since the day that she hatched these precious little eiders. It'll take a few hours for all the birds to waterproof completely. And as we move up the beach, we are visited by a fisherman who generously offers us a salmon for lunch. But Pat shows a preference for cod fillet. Well, he's got that too. Bessie prepares the camp stove. It won't take long for us to have a meal fit for a king. The wonderful smell of pan-fried salmon and cod fills the air. But wildlife biologists are all alike. They're always checking notes or weighing scales or something. Well, Ian is no different. But for me, this is the stuff that memories are made of. And the cook-up in this wonderful outdoors is most likely the thing that I'll remember most in years to come. It would take an awful lot to distract me from enjoying a moment like this. Well, it looks like everything is ready. Now it's time to enjoy our meal. Well, Bryce constructs one of his famous salmon witches. Well, I use a flat rock for a plate. Well, that's eating outdoors. But fresh salmon, cooked to perfection, and seasoned with the smell of wild flowers and spruce. Now that's really something. But food, companionship, and shelter at the end of the day, that's about all man really needs. When I spend time on these lovely remote islands, I always get a feeling of living life to the fullest. There's an overwhelming sense of contentment and a real appreciation of freedom. As I light my pipe, I reflect on how Ed Pilgrim got so involved with these eider ducks. Before he left years ago to move to the mainland to work, Ed and the people of Maine Brook used to hunt these ducks for food. There were tens of thousands of birds then, but when he moved back home again a few years ago, he was shocked and alarmed to find that the birds had almost been wiped out. So right then, Ed decided to find out what was happening and to try and do something about it. It didn't take him long to see some of the problems. The gull population had exploded. Here on the beach there are hundreds of eggshells washed ashore, showing the devastation of the nest by marauding gulls. But these lovely flowers and bushes conceal another predator, the wild mink. The mink is more devastating than the gull. It preys on young chicks and adult birds. A bed of wild parsnips lie at my feet. I pick one and peel it so that I can smell that sweet, distinct aroma of parsnip. But as I do, I wonder if it's such a good idea releasing these birds on this Maine island. Eiders never nested here. They may have had a reason. So I wonder if these holding pens will stop the mink. They're as much at home in the water as they are on land. Well, we'll find out. The young birds have done what we hoped they would. They've all waterproofed themselves. So the boys get down to work. The boys work together as a team at this point in the project. But in the beginning, Ed and Bessie were all alone. Then Ed got Ducks Unlimited involved. And with their financial support, Ed's dream to help his ducks became a reality. If my grandfather were here, he'd say, "Fling them out, boys, and let them go." But because Ian is a scientist, it has to be done properly. After each bird is weighed, it has to be sexed. It's difficult to tell the sex of a young bird. I tell Ian it's embarrassing and unnecessary to subject these little birds to such indignity. I tell him that this is a female anyway. He confirms this with surprise and wants to know my method. And I tell Ian that other scientists before him have determined that statistically the birds are about 50-50, males and females, so why not guess like I just did? And he assures me that that's not the scientific way to do it. Now, putting bands on these birds, that's another thing. That's the only way to find out what happens to them after they're released. They'll be back again in a couple of years, and in 3 years' time, they'll be nesting here on these islands. These bands will come in handy then. That's about it. He's ready for the pen. While Ian finishes the rest of the ducks back in the cove, Ed and I go out here to the Duck Islands. Ed wants to show me what he's done to help the ducks out here. Most of the birds have gone now, but there's still a few around. I ramble over the island with great interest. It's not a big island, but thousands of birds nested on these few islands years ago. This is what I came to see, Ed's boxes. He built these as duck shelters. If the eiders would only go underneath, then their eggs would be safe from the gulls. But would they? Well, after a couple of years, they finally got the idea. And now all the boxes are being used. This nest was probably abandoned for some reason, but the eggs were safe. They're still a little warm. It is hopeful. The secret of these boxes is that gulls will not go under anything less than 9 inches high. So the eggs and chicks are safe under the box. But the gulls are always watching for an opportunity. Bryce lifts another box and another abandoned nest. But the one next to it has been successful. It draws my attention to a dead Arctic tern. But what's important about this is that the bird has a band on its leg. This is what banding birds is all about. The exchange of information from one part of the world to the other. Our attention soon comes back to sea ducks. Ed lifts the next box. He is shocked and upset. Beneath it lies a dead mother eider and a single chick. But the bad news is that they were killed by a wild mink. A mink on a small island like this could play havoc with an entire bird population. As I walk to explore the windward side of the island, I know that Ed must be upset. But there's one consolation. Most of the ducks have already hatched and gone. But as I check this tern's nest, I try to put Ed's project in perspective. The 100 eggs that Ed borrowed from these nests last spring is really the hope of the future. For if only 40% of the young ducks that Ed and Ian release today return 3 years from now to nest, that will mean a population of over 5,000 birds in 10 years. This little Arctic tern is to me a symbol of endurance, and yet it seems to be such a frail little thing. But that's nature. Sometimes nature's greatest strength is in its fragility. Under the watchful eye of its mother, this little fellow is going to do all right. Sometimes, when things get a little out of kilter, nature needs our help. And that's only fair, for most always, we were the ones that started the problem in the first place. I walk back to the boat across this beach of broken mussel shells. And then I realize that one of the philosophies that I've had all my life has been reinforced by Ed and Bessie Pilgrim. I've always believed that with determination and a sense of purpose, each one of us can make a real difference in this world that we live in. We head back to Maine Brook and leave Pat and Ian to look after the ducks. It's a long time yet before sunset, and we have other things we want to see before the end of this day.
For cooking and baking, or as a spread, you can depend on the fresh taste of Eversweet margarine. Picture it melting through a freshly baked potato, or running over an ear of steaming corn. Eversweet margarine adds a special flavor all its own. Take a piping hot roll, fresh from the oven. Now, spread on the Eversweet. Eversweet margarine. The difference it makes all the difference.
There's an aftermath this morning, just waiting here for you, serving you with energy in everything we do. So take the round to friendly service. We're so proud of all we do. Trust your car to aftermath. Our energy is for you.
If you're a fisherman looking for a dependable diesel, a Volvo Penta from Bell Diesel and Industrial is the answer. Available from 18 to 500 horsepower and backed by over 75 years of experience. Volvo Penta diesels are built to meet the demands of commercial fishermen. Bell Diesel and Industrial has the parts and factory-trained service people to keep your engine in top condition. At Bell Diesel and Industrial, 14 Austin Street in the O'Leary Industrial Park, Volvo Penta diesel service is second to none.
Thinking about financing a new car or truck? If so, think about financing as low as 8.9% from your Newfoundland Ford and Mercury dealers on all new Ford and Mercury cars, Ranger pickups, and Bronco 2s. Maybe you're thinking about leasing. Think about financing as low as 9%. Now, think about the money you'll save on that new Ford or Mercury car, Ranger or Bronco 2. But don't think about it too long. This offer will end April 30th. Buying or leasing from your nearest Newfoundland Ford and Mercury dealer before April 30th is really for your best interest.
It's late afternoon, and we have traveled far to get here. This flooded marshland is another project of Ducks Unlimited. They've built this control dam. It maintains a water level and backs the brook far back into the country. Bryce and I have decided to take a look at this, so we load our gear and get going. Bryce always takes a fishing rod along. Keeping the frying pan going is part of our outdoor trips. Probably as much a part of it as anything else. I think more. The evening sun starts to dip in the July sky. But darkness won't come for hours yet. It's a beautiful afternoon. And as I paddle up the pond, I notice that the bottom is covered with moss. The flooded marsh is becoming a pond. So I take my camera underwater and follow the brook upstream. This aquatic plant growth is ideal for ducks, and grasses and weeds are growing everywhere. A stickleback darts in front of me. These little fish are food for mergansers. Freshwater clams are starting to appear all along the bottom. Young seed clams and other crustaceans attract loons and grebes. I move out into the middle. Here the water is deeper. The spring brook, swollen by the melting snow, cuts a deep trench under the ice, which sometimes freezes to a depth of 2.5 feet on some of these ponds. The current sweeps away mud and other overburden, bearing the rocks. Here, fish can spawn. Another stickleback stops right in front of my camera. I stop still in the water to take a better look. And in the distance, I see something I've never seen before, a large school of trout. I watch in fascination. This is the first time I've ever seen a large school of trout underwater and had a chance to film them. Over to my left, I interrupt another large school of fish that seem to be feeding on something. They scatter in all directions as I get closer. Then I notice the vertical markings on their sides. They look like young salmon to me. Well, this brook leads into a salmon river anyway, so that makes sense. But it's ducks that we're concerned about. This mother black seems to have 18 or 20 little ones. There's so many I can't even count them. Further up the pond by the ridge, ducks feed along the rocky shoreline. While others hide in the tall cattail grasses. We flush some of the blacks out of the brook ahead of us. While a less concerned mother takes her brood along the alders, we sit quietly and watch for a while. Sensing some danger in the alder bed, she leads her family away. And we move on up the pond. Ducks Unlimited enhance marshland habitat all over North America. Not only do they help in countering our diminishing marshlands, but they also inadvertently create trout ponds like this. Ducks are quiet this time of the evening, just before sunset, and we get a great chance to film these as they swim across to my left. But Bryce decides he's going to take advantage of this and catch a few fish to fry for breakfast. Well, I'll do the paddling.
Look, it's going to fly already, like.
Yeah, you got him on, Bryce. That's a beauty. That's a beauty. Got him?
No. That's not, you know, that's not, this pond is probably full of trout.
Yes, boy, there's no question about that. There's one out there, Bryce. Just roll over.
One after you fly there now.
One after yours, too, Bryce. You got that one on?
You only need half a dozen anyway.
Boy, 4 like that is good. That's a beauty. That is price.
Not bad. Nice mud trout.
Yeah, they're all mud trout. Yeah. Boy, what a beautiful evening, old man. Isn't this lovely up here on this pond?
Worth the trip just for this.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Lloyd? I got another one after me. Fly.
What kind of a fly have you got there, Bryce? Oh, man, that one should do it.
Yeah, just a skill.
The call of a distant loon signals the end of another beautiful day. I make a final cast for a trout. And as I do, I realize that this great outdoors has been made just a little better today by just a few people. What could we accomplish if we all played just a small part? Well, I've tried to do it in my own way, by trying to share my love for our great outdoors with anyone that will take the time to stop and listen. Maybe in doing so, I will make someone just curious enough to try it for the first time. Now, if I do this, I'm sure that my efforts will not be in vain. For there's no doubt in my mind, for once they discover the beauty and magic of our great land, they too will become part of this wonderful Newfoundland outdoors.